Welcome to Forward Focus. My name's Tom Burdick. Today we're talking about growth and growth management, whether it's ruining our neighborhoods. Got a couple of guests today. First guest to my immediate left is Councilman Brian Derdowski, King County Council. And next to Brian is Bill Elder. And Bill is a, well, tell us what group you're with.
Well, I'm here today with the Washington Population Coalition. We're a group of people that are interested in population issues.
What we're doing throughout the state is we are turning forecasts into self-fulfilling prophecies.
Now, Bill, if we can create a public emergency and build a baseball stadium, why can't we create a public emergency and say, folks, we've got to get out and compete for Nike. Nike's coming to town. Everybody get on the bandwagon. It seems like we have this emergency because everybody wants to work for the next Microsoft. Okay, and so we're all hungry for that. Isn't that kind of what's driving a lot?
Well, what this has turned into is the Growth Management Act. It's instead of 20 years planning for growth, it's 20 years plan for developer profits. Yeah. I mean, and that's what we've got driving this system. And our current growth decisions are being driven by that whole lobby and the profit motive. And that's fine if they would internalize their costs instead of externalizing.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if impact fees were placed at a level where a new subdivision was required to pay the full marginal cost, not average cost, but marginal cost of the roads, the schools, the sewer and water systems that are required to service that long term, that would be fine. And I think we'd see a whole different, we'd see the market working without all these subsidies that distort our economy and the housing market in particular. And I think we'd also end up with a much more moderate growth rate without a lot of any kind of draconian, heavy-handed regulation.
And lower taxes.
And lower taxes, yeah.
Well, Brian, so is the Growth Management Act failing the neighborhoods?
No, I don't think so. I think that the way that the planners in various jurisdictions, and more importantly, the way that the elected officials on city councils and county councils that are largely dominated by development interests or by candidates who support development interests, that those entities have distorted the intent of the Growth Management Act. The State Growth Management Act does not require people to live in ticky-tacky little boxes in high density. It doesn't require that. In fact, it lays out a delicate balancing act, and that is that you plan for 20 years worth of growth, but you also are obligated to ensure that you can meet your local levels of service standards, that you can, that developers will pay their fair share, that you protect the environment as you go. But somehow along the way, because of the political composition of our city councils and our county councils, the emphasis has been on accommodating the 20 years worth of growth, and these other balancing components have largely been compromised away. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
King County has a law that is consistent with the state growth management law, because the state growth management law requires this, that there be adequate roads to serve a development.
Sure.
Otherwise, the development is denied.
That's reasonable.
Well, within the last 18 months, the county has had to deny some applications because of inadequate road infrastructure. So what happened? The developers went to the county roads department and to the elected officials on the county council and the county executive and said, well, let's change the standards. So what they did is they moved the goalpost, and now what was once considered unacceptable levels of service has now been determined to be acceptable. And in addition to that, there are other technical loopholes that have been created in order to keep the developer's game going. So
it
now
sounds like David Copperfield is managing that.
Well,
it's kind of a, that illusion thing,
Well, it's not that. It's more serious than that.
We can make those overcrowded roads just disappear,
Well, what it is that land use is very technical, very complex.
Yeah.
The average citizen is not familiar with that process and doesn't watch the locally elected officials and what they're doing. And the locally elected officials are hearing, by and large, from the development interests.
Well, they're hearing from them financially too at their elections.
Well, the most reliable and the largest source of campaign financing, far and away, for your local city councils and county councils are development interests, the Master Builders Association, the Association of General Contractors, and these folks have a point of view, and the result is, Tom, is that our communities are being shaped by demographers and by developers' self-interest, as opposed to what are community standards and the kind of future that we want for our children. And this is the perversion of the State Growth Management Act.
Let's talk a little bit about, Bill, when does density become crowding? Because crowding is to growth what noise is to sound. It's unwanted growth. And it's unwanted density. And some people are very happy in a very dense background, and other people are what I call density misfits. They want to be out in the woods someplace.
Well, I've worked with a number of environmental groups over the years, and the presumption has been that, well, if we just channel that growth into the existing cities, the existing urban areas, then we're going to be fine. We can live with the projections that we get from the demographers. But I think we've seen that not pan out. I mean, Charlie Chong in his candidacy for city council a couple years ago was a reflection of people in Seattle saying, we like our neighborhood densities with single-family homes.
And they don't want more density.
We don't want urban villages in the midst of our areas, or at least we don't want them built in a way that doesn't fit in with our community and minimize the impacts to an
So
acceptable
people are feeling threatened that that sudden change is going to also reverse what they've gained in terms of the image and the feeling they have for the neighborhood. They're going to lose what they've acquired in a sense of familiarity.
Yeah.
So, Brian, there is a heavy psychological component to crowding. And yet the folks are coming, and unless we put guards, that's no point to pass.
Don't assume that. Yeah.
You know, unless we do that, folks are going to come here with the U-Hauls. They're going to move into town. They're going to want some place to stay. How do we get those of us that live here to accept that?
Well, the current situation is not that we have a guard at the borders, but we have the taxpayer, or an agent of the taxpayer, currently is writing a $20,000 check for every family that moves into the state, because $20,000 is the estimated public subsidy for every housing unit that is constructed in the state. It's $20,000. So that means that the impact of that in-migration is being picked up by the taxpayer as opposed to the in-migration. So that, therefore, if I'm a company and I want to import labor from other places in the country, and I want to do that because our educational system is not training the engineers and the scientists that are necessary to keep our economy going, then the taxpayer pays for my importing of that labor. And that $20,000, in my mind, that is currently going to subsidize in-migration should go into our educational system so that your kids and my kids and Bill's kids can be trained to take the jobs of the next century.
And this is a choice that we're not offered. I mean, what has struck me over the last month is listening to the, forget the name of it, Nancy McCormick out of Redmond is chairing it, the East Side Transportation Planning Coalition or something like that. And they went through what I think was really basically a sham of getting public input about how can we address traffic congestion on the east side over the next 20 years. And we saw coming out of that a questionnaire saying, basically, what do you want to do about this? And the only choice we were given was an increase in gas taxes in order to accommodate all the growth. And that's where the public has to say, look, we want real choices. We want our public officials not to just give us this funnel con job that they're giving us. And that's what we're getting.
Brian, how many times have we seen a lot of cities' growth attitudes driven by staff planners? And listen, if people don't come and if we don't plan, they don't have a job. All right. So in order to maintain their job, they've got to be able to generate maps and put on their green glasses and go at it. And also, too, those staff planners are backed up by planning commissions who are typically stocked with retired realtors. Now, that feeds the planners feed the city councils. The city councilman was elected for God knows what reason, but it all sounds good to him, so he just votes for it.
Well,